Welcome everyone to the Around the World webinar series. Today we are navigating the jungle of AI. You all must have used AI, and because of the popular demand, we have Quentin and George with us to explain us what its potential in research. So Quentin, take it away.
Thank you, Ashish. So, hi everyone. So first of all, sorry for my voice. My throat is a bit itchy. So I will do my best to articulate, but I'm glad to be here today to make this presentation with George, my friend and colleague, about to introduce the potential of generative AI for research. So since we have a broad audience, the objective of this session will be to be general enough to include everyone, and still you can get something at the end, I hope, original. So we will have three parts. The first one will be globally, very generally, what is generative AI? Then we will see potential applications in research and some advices. And then we'll finish with a part which is try to think about the impact for research. So first of all, let's say a bit why George and me are here today to talk about this. So we are both MSCA fellow from a project called Health Cascade. So it's a project trying to make evidence-based co-creation trustworthy. Shortly, co-creation is an approach where we gather a varied stakeholders together to try to solve the common problems with like government value, like democratic, collective intelligence. Shortly, it's a complex process. And George and me, our work is to try to see what kind of technology can improve and enable the process. So he's a computer scientist, I'm a cognitive scientist. And together we think the technology and we develop some technological solutions. And then we do this from September 2021. And when in November 2022, ChatGPT arrived, and we were already working on natural language processing technology. But then we had this new tool, which allows us basically to test a lot of things, being much more versatile, and think much more about large language model, which is a type of generative AI. And then we started to think about potential implications for co-creation and collaboration. We are also working on how it can be implemented for medical diagnosis. And basically, we see there is a lot of transferability between these potential usages and actually in research. And we actively, for the last 8 months at least, try to test every potential we can have in scientific practice. So this is why we are here today. We feel it's a passionate subject, but also moving fast. So we would like to contribute by launching a conversation about potential impact in research. So to start, I think it's interesting to see that everything started a bit with ChatGPT in a way that it makes a lot of noise, and still today you can find a lot of articles trying to think about how it's going to change a society, how to approach this technology. On the other side, you have also a lot of sources about what are the potential negative impacts and how you should mitigate your usage and be careful and everything. You also have courses already available about generative AI or a lot of tutorial. And obviously it's impacting and there's a lot of noise. It's hard to see clear. And research practice is not spared about this. I'm sure you saw that the question about how generative AI is now cannot be considered as a co-authors, or some scientists try to write full papers about this or generate data. And yeah, it's happening. And I hope after this presentation, we'll be able to see a bit more clear about this. So I would like to make it a bit interactive to know a bit how the audience is actually, if they are actually using generative AI. So I would like to invite you for a short questions or 2 short questions on Mentimenters. So I will share in the chat the link. I invite you to click on it, and I will share my screen with the result. and we can have a look together about how popular is generative AI in our audience. Okay. Good. Okay, so you can see my screen, George? Okay, good. So we can see that there is often, okay, often sometimes. So it's look like our audience already adopted it, never tried. Okay, so everyone heard about it. It's good. And globally, there is a sometime use. That's nice. Okay, good. It gives us a good idea. Let's move to the next questions, which is basically keep it short, to be honest. Few words, just about, obviously, you pick up because you are using potentially often or sometimes. What are the main usages you're taking? Are you usages like to summarize papers, or maybe it's helped you to create an outline or to write some draft for social media communication? Editing, nice. Email bureaucracy to pull information. Grammar checking. Translation, okay. Draft, rephrasing, confirm translating, language, okay. Abstract confidence translation. Email, correcting, editing. So a lot of about adapting the language, proofreading, summarizing paper, supporting writing structures. So a lot of about writing and accessing the information. Good. Great. Okay, nice. So give us an idea about how our audience is using it. And I see that actually we might propose new potential. So I'm going to share back my slide with you. Up. Wait a petit minute. I can switch back my presentation mode. Nice. Okay. So thank you for answering the question. It's very interesting. We are digging a lot into this technology, but we don't have time to discuss a lot and see how the overall population is using it. So for the first part, if you remember, we are going to start with I'm sure most of you know how it's using, because it looks like you're using, but how works generative AI. I will just make a very light reminder and not too technical, but I think it's important to understand, especially for now when we hear that generative AI can be almost magic and it's like a human inside a box sometimes. So the foundations of AI, the model that is used for generative AI is basically deep learning model with 4 different architectures with kind of launch this capacity. So deep learning is part of artificial intelligence. Within you have machine learning, and then you have the field of deep learning model, which is characterized by this kind of, as we can see on the graph, neural network, which is made from kind of architectures of different equations, which we learn from the data. So you present the data to the model, and the model will learn the different pattern inside the data. And basically, what has been made until now is just making this kind of architecture bigger, which is necessary with more computer power and the accessibility of massive quantity of data, a huge quantity of data. And that made this kind of artificial model more and more accurate, depending on the usage and the objective we wanted them to do. Then after this, it's interesting to make the difference between discriminative AI, which is mostly what we had access until generative AI, which is basically making differences between class of data, differentiating, classify, identifying pattern, and draw conclusions. When we present basically So you make groups inside the data and see the pattern. And when you present an input, the model is able to say, okay, it is or not this type of data. So you make a decision based on inputs and what you learn from the data. Generative AI go the step further, basically. It doesn't have a specific goal, and it will create new content based on the training data. So it will capture the underlying distributions, like what does basically discriminative AI. And then based, like triggered by a prompt, it will generate novel data points in a way. An easier example is that basically for discriminative AI, you will have a picture, so we say, okay, is it a cat? And the discriminative AI will say yes or no. And in the situation of generative AI, it will have learned kind of how a cat is. And so when you will ask, generate me a cat, it will be able to generate a picture that you will recognize it as a cat if it's well trained, if the data are good and etc. So that's the difference. The most important things to understand is that it's a mathematical model. It's a progression into the technology, and it has been mostly made by this characteristic of massive quantity of data, computational power, and this kind of shift to less specific goal and ability to generate data. So what is interesting is that there is like multiple application domain of generative AI. We can make text generation, which is like ChatGPT and BAR, image generation like DALL-E, audio generation, what we see for the singing, like singers and protest about it, because yeah, it can actually mimic the human voice. We can have video generation, code generation, data augmentation, so it's used to train even more model, and virtual world. And basically the society, I mean, some actors of the society are very excited about this. And they predict, not only McKinsey consulting groups, that is gonna basically change the work of people, augmenting the capabilities, automating some activity like never before. And they think that it could impact basically in the short midterm the coding IT field, the entertaining field, education one, finance, health and medicine, and more generally workforce and work of peoples in general. So this is why there is a lot of noise, basically. People are expecting a lot of impact. And this is the same case for scientific research, to be honest. And I think since a lot of you are using it, you already notice it. But for research, what we are mostly interested in, it's more text generation, and especially large language model, which is basically can achieve text completion, summarization, question answering, translation, code generation, image and text pairing, conversational interaction. So I'm sure you saw a lot of tools popping on the web, specifically made for science and research to find, for example, specific references, to explore some PDF to help you and support writing. And it's evolving fast. Some are disappearing, some are appearing. But most of them are basically built from ChatGPT, not all of them, but some. And what for this presentation, we will kind of focus on ChatGPT. We are not sponsored about ChatGPT. We are not getting money about this, but we started from this basically, and we are still using it today. So our experience is basically based on that. And it's good because it's a versatile tool while still being accessible. So I think it's a good benchmark to start the conversation. So here a bit the situation about what is generative AI. For people who never saw about ChatGPT, I'm sure actually you already did because we made a little form, but this is how it looks like the launch screen with like, basically it looks like a chat screen. You are going to start a conversation. And then you will interact with the model to ask specific things. You can ask to generate graph, you can ask and correct code, and you can explore abstract notion. It's very large, but it's to give an idea of people's, because I'm not going to dig into specific examples because it will take a lot of time, but I wanted to make people visualize it. So now we are going to speak a bit more about current potential. So I'm going to present potential through, let's say, the main step of a scientific research. And all of what I'm going to present as an example, we tried it. We tried it together. So for example, for identifying research gap and formulating questions, generative AI and large language model and ChatGPT in our situation can help for literature review, for generating hypotheses, for research design and methodology. It can help for method selection, data collections. It can support data cleaning, pre-processing, data interpretations, drafting reports, referencing and citations. It can help for feedback on writing, proofreading, journal selection, abstract and manuscript preparation, social media summary, and creating relevant questions and discussions. So what is interesting now is that I've been very fast first. Obviously, we don't have time to make a tutorial for each of this usage. It will take at least 2 hours for each, and I think it will deserve a proper course and a week of workshop. So first of all, it's not magic. So what I'm saying now is that we tried. We think it can contribute and can be useful, not at the same level. Each of these usage has specific potential and specific issue and specific limits, and that need to be considered. And like, it's very interesting because actually you're not going to just put the paper in your machine and say, write me a literature review. But still, using it can help you and support you to make, in my opinion, more efficient science, let's say. But it's need to be careful considered. Since we don't have time to go deep into it, we would like still to give you some advice that we think is relevant and that we might not hear somewhere else. So the first advice, if you want to approach and use this technology, is to properly learn how to use it. And it's mean understand how it's works. We know, I show you a bit earlier, basically, how was working a model mathematically, but you need to understand that, okay, it's treating the data like this, it's generating basically based on probability, tokens, and try to make a sentence relevant for me, but it doesn't think by itself. So you can predict what are the kind of error. It's necessary to be able to interact with the machine properly to learn prompt engineering. So it looks like you're talking to someone, but you're not. You're just interacting with the model. It's between talking and daily language and coding. And basically, they have its own grammar. So you have like a pictures basically with some basic rules that is good to consider when you're creating your own prompt. There is a lot of tips and tricks and a lot of advices everywhere. It's not always easy, but it's good to keep track of your prompting and understanding what it's working, what doesn't work. And that means that it's really important to adopt an iterative approach. Don't just ask some things and take the first answer. Sometimes it's good, depending on the usage, but it's good to try to refine your interaction and your outcome. George was telling me that a good idea also is to have kind of an idea where you want to land and try to always redirect your conversation to this destination. It seems a bit abstract, but it depends what you are trying to do. And it's also asked, basically, you need to be the expert because the model make mistake, make what we call hallucinations. And I like these examples because if you recognize these pictures, which was for the advertisement campaign for this seminar, you can see unlocking potential generative AI and you have a mistake and research and scientific is actually not well written. And this is a basic example of an hallucination. I ask it to generate this picture with this text. It did almost perfectly, except this word. And I can spot it because I like to think I speak English well enough to spot it. But if it would have been in Chinese, I wouldn't be able to do it. I would have been able to say, oh, it's Chinese, but I wouldn't be able to spot the mistake specifically. So in order to interact well with the machine, you need to stay the experts and proofread the outcomes. And I think this is why it's a very relevant tool, maybe more for experts like researchers in their field than actually people who try to just gather information and fact about the world with them, because they are not able to spot mistake while we can in our field. So stay the expert when you're interacting with that. Then you need to think about a new workflow, which is basically understanding when it's useful for you. Sometimes it's not useful. Sometimes it will bring more noise and it can bring too much information. So know when you're good and know where you need to use it. You need to change maybe your workflow also. It's easy to generate a draft now thanks to that, but you will spend much more time to edit and basically implement the substance inside your work, which make it an innovative work. So it's good to think about it. You cannot just replace some of your activities. Make the most of this. So try to understand again where it's useful and where it's not based on your workflow. I like to think, and I think this is something we don't talk a lot, there is some cognitive challenges by using this tool because you're interacting with technology that actually resonate much more with your mind. You need to engage actively. You need to go to the technology. This technology is not going to give you something by itself easily. You need to interact, have conversations. You need to be the expert. You need to be iterative. It asks energy also. You need to challenge your cognitive bias because the model can be very compliant. So if you ask something and basically you make a confirmation bias because you try to confirm your hypothesis, depending on the model can be very nice with you and it actually can be counterproductive for your practice. So think again about the good practice. Then there is cognitive load management. Again, I think if you automatize some easy task that was not requiring a lot of energy for you, like writing an email, now it can do it for you. But it means that the contributions you need to bring is higher. So meaning that cognitively, it's also more costly. So my feeling of using this tool is also like, okay, it asks me actually more energy, because I don't know, 30% of my time was easy task. And now I have, 90% of complicated task. It's very stimulating, but still energy, which can lead to more cognitive bias. And then there is this question of over-reliance. Is there some activity that you should do yourself, even the model can do it for you? Like I know, for example, I try to use it to analyze data. And I was feeling like, okay, it's efficient, but at the same time, I feel I know less my data because I didn't go through it. So it's good to consider like, okay, do I need to go through it to have a proper expertise and be able to have a good discussions? Or actually, is it okay to use the support from a technology? So that for the advice. So now I think it's interesting to go a step further and try to have a nice exercise to just think about the potential possibility in the futures. And this is really a nice things we've done together about, okay, what if it's continue to progress because the technology is still progressing and it can progress fast, what could it bring and what could it change for scientific and research world? So we took again our like step, but actually we can imagine that so technology one day will be able, maybe potentially, there is a lot of conditional, to predict trend in research. And so you know already what could be the best paper based on the literatures that could have the most impact. Can make some cross-disciplinary analysis to find innovative questions to ask. It could support you much more to have innovative and the best way to test your hypothesis. It can also make simulation and modeling about your hypothesis and how it could react depending on the result. It could automate data interpretations. It could make complex data synthesis based on multiple sources of data. It could eventually create a dynamic report which will evolve with the data you are gathering. It can create visual interactive content. It could make a constructive critics, because I'm sure some of you might have tried to input one of your draft and say, okay, what is good, what is bad. It's interesting, but it's not perfect. So we can imagine that actually it can be better and actually really make some relevant critics. It can also enable real-time peer collaborations by maybe solving issue conflict you may have and help to have relevant contribution during collaborative work. It can help you to target a specific journal in a better way. It could enhance reader engagement by basically adapting the abstract, for example, or the content of your paper for the expertise of your reader. We can imagine also like much more engaging the society thanks to dialogue system with your papers, or eventually like continuing to update your paper even after publishing it in a way. So there is potential. It will request a lot of technological development and everything, but I think since it's moving fast, it's always beneficial to imagine a bit, because this will help us basically to think about the big question that need to be asked about generative AI. And before going to this last part, I would like to ask you to come back on Mentimeters, where we will ask two other questions to gather a bit your feelings about this. So I'm going back to switch my screen and I will move on. But drink a bit of water, please go on. So what are your feelings concerning the emergence of generative AI? It can be general or it can be specifically for research world. Anything that, if you feel confident, if you feel scared, if you feel that it's going to make a revolution, anything. Okay, good. So we have curious, we have worrying, panic, scared, but we have also exciting, expecting. We have a lot of potential, but need to be free. We have for lazy people like me, useful, excited, concerned. I would see like a slight trend around this kind of 2-3 aspects of being like a bit worrying, but also exciting, and also interrogative about how it's going to change. Worth the time. Nice. Good. Yeah, I think it's translate, and even it's translate, I think you have like a good trend around excited, because I've been in some presentation where people were mostly concerned about it. So I think most of us also grasp the potential. Good. So let's move to the last questions. What is still missing to make the best of generative AI in research, from your opinion? What today you would like or you would think would be interesting to make the best today, but also with the future potential? Something short, yeah, whatever you think is relevant. Enhance reliability, ethical use, reference proofreading, variable resources to train. training, reliability, accountability, public understanding, yeah, better self-correction of the AI, check it, control mechanism, adequate prompting, more insight in what happened to your input, yeah, true. Transparency about training data, policy regulation, free of charge, absolutely, ready to use API, rules regarding use and misuse. Good mathematical or logical thinking. Interesting, okay. Stronger policies. Good, good. Suspension of the communication here. Absolutely. Good. Nice. I see there is already good ideas, or good ideas. I'm judging like that, but ideas I'm sharing, let's say. Nice. So I'm going, thank you for taking part. It's very interesting and I'm glad that we can interact like this. So I'm going back on the presentation. Up. I'm going to put back presentation mode. Amazing. So we are going to move to the last part, which is basically linked with the question we just asked. What are the impacts that we thought on research? So I think we start with positive and negative impact potential. They are not like exhaustive, but this is what we find. The first one is like it's likely to increase efficiency and productivity. I think this is what we all feeling, like we go faster and better. Then it can enhance accessibility and collaborations by getting access to different science material and also helping people to understand each other better. It can improve the quality of research by basically spotting obvious mistakes, in later potentially also maybe identifying fraud. Promotion of interdisciplinary research. For example, me, I work with different kind of fields, and it's sometimes I need to understand complex ideas from different fields, and it actually can be useful for me to explore a concept which is kind of complicated. It can create dynamic and interactive research outputs, which also can be very good to open science more to the society, to make it also like more interactive. The negative impact are still right there, I might say. There is an obvious risk of bias and misinformation. The data are coming from models which can be biased, and there is always a risk that we take for granted what is not. We can have an over-reliance on technology, which means that what can we trust for the technology, what we can let the technology does, and what we should do. And especially if one does the technology disappear for any reason, or we discover that there is an issue. There is an important intellectual property and plagiarism concern. I think it has been spotted early on, still today, about the data used. And if I have an amazing idea coming from the model, is it not coming from nowhere in a way? So how much can I use it? And also plagiarism concern. And yes, exactly. So then undermining the peer review process. So there is this question also like, are we going to use this model to make, to automatize the peer review process or affect the peer review process? And if I use a model, how is it going to affect also the process as an author? So there is this question about this fundamental pillar of science today about reviewing process, which still have issue today, but how this technology is going to interfere with it. And there is also economic and professional displacements. Like if we automatize some of the process inside the research ecosystem, there is obviously some activity that might disappear. What does it mean about expertise, about people's And I think it's a hot topic everywhere in many fields. We see, for example, for coding or designers. I think it's something we need also to ask for researcher. And then there is this question of accessibility and equity concern. I saw some of the comments in the Mentimeter was about, oh, it need to be free. And it's true, because if it's actually bringing a lot of positive potential impact, and especially increasing efficiency and productivity, it means it's bringing also a competitivity advantage. So should it be fair to make it available to everyone, and everyone is trained to be able to use it? So there is this idea of digital divide and who has access to the technology. So this is a big potential impact and negative and positive impact we find. I think we identified what we could say is the big questions that we think need to be asked and addressed today in order to mitigate the negative impact and optimize the potential positive impact. And it starts from basically developing the technology and asking about what model we need for which usage. What is an acceptable accuracy? What are the origin and the quality of data to train your model? There is a question of transparency of the model, accessibility of it, and the sustainability when we speak about technology who are very, very consuming a lot of energy. And actually, it's interesting because these questions are asked for any domain we are using this technology. It's not specifically for research, but they still need to be asked also for research, and especially when we try to make ethical research. Then there is a question of interacting with it. And it raises a question of how do you use it, interact efficiently and ethically with it? How can you ensure by integrating this tool in your research practice, you can ensure scientific integrity? There is this question of what you can automatize in your practice and what you should be more augmented, so supported by the technology, meaning that what new skill you need to develop, but also what crucial skill you need to maintain. Like we were discussing with Josh, for example, some people like to think that we should all put on the machine to go faster all the time. But at the same time, we still ask kids today to learn how to make divisions. Even we have calculator to make it for them. So I think today research and science need to ask what are these skill and quality and knowledge that need to still be maintained, even the technology can do it better and faster for you, to be sure you stay the expert and you can still proofread the output of the technology and make good research. And the final domain is like using the outcome. When you have your outcome, how we can explain it. And there is this core question of what is the intellectual contributions, and the one of the model. And I think this is a core debate we have today for co-authorship, like where I do bring a substantial contribution to the work and what is the one of the model. And so am I still useful, basically? And what kind of attitude we should have with technology? Should we consider it as a tool, like Excel software, or as an assistant, much more like, I read some scientists saying it's a bit like having a PhD student or an undergrad assistant, or shall we consider it like some other thing, a collaborator? And at this point, it's like a co-author. And if we are able to answer this question, we can answer also the question of intellectual property right and authorships. So maybe there is a lot of noise about this, and maybe there is already some answer about this. But this is mostly what we wanted to share with you today. Obviously, it wanted to show an overview. I hope at the end you know a bit more about generative AI, but I saw that many of you were already using it. But maybe raising some idea and thoughts about what should be made for research and in scientific practice to make the best of it. So I'm going to finish here, and I'm going to open for questions answered, but also discussions time if you have like common story to share. Thank you very much for your attention.
If anyone has questions, just raise your hand, or you can ask, or you just post it in the chat. I'm sure you must have some questions.
Can I ask, do you feel that is the EU in particular making plans on how to address generative AI, particularly for grant writing and grant seeking?
Personally, I don't think so. I think I didn't see anything about this. I know they're working, like they made like a first like kind of regulations that was very praised, like saying this is the first one in the world about it. But I didn't see anything. Maybe I'm wrong. Please, if you know something, please send it in the chat about specific guidelines for research and applying for proposal. It's a very good question, and I know some people get approval for proposal by using this technology. So
yeah, if I can answer that, yeah, I mean, I think EU knows already if you use ChatGPT in your grant, and there is an AI Act recently launched, so I'm sure they're working on it to incorporate that into the R&I world as well. And I think we have Shuping raise his hand. Go for it, Shuping. You're muted. We can't hear you. Nope.
there's some technical issue, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you can type it in the chat if you want, if you can, or we can move on to next question in the meanwhile. So there is a question in the chat. Can you please share a comment on repeatability of output?
So I think for the repeatability of the output, that largely depends on the kind of model and your task. And what do you want to achieve by repeatability? Do you want to have the exact same, let's say you go to ChatGPT and you ask the question, do you want to have the exact same question, the exact same answer? Or do you want the answer to be in the same line? Because there are ways to do verification of your answer and to move a model towards reproducing a similar answer. But if you want to do, for example, repeatability of on a token by token basis, then it's a different thing. And we need to keep in mind that these are probabilistic models. So you might not get the exact same answer every time, but you can get the same, well, let's say that you might not get the same token by token answer, but the answer might be the same. And then there are, like, on a more technical level, there are parameters you can change and stuff like that. So you can guide models to have answers that are more in line with what you normally generate. So for example, if you remove temperature, if you put temperature to 0, you can have like a more consistent answer and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think if I can share something also, I think for reproducibility, I was thinking for research purposes. And I know some people are using large language model in methods. And in this situation, I think it should be very well described, defined, and narrow for a specific target of outcome. But if you're interacting like ChatGPT to ask different thing and large, and I think you need to be sure that you don't need to reproduce the outcome in order to support the value of your intellectual contribution in your paper. And that's defined definitely how, as I said, when you stay the expert of the contributions. But yeah, that will be my mindset.
Yeah, that's good. And I think Shuping wrote his answer, his question in the chat. May I know whether there is any way to detect AI-generated text in the students' coursework? Turnitin doesn't seem to be helpful on this. So do you have any insights?
Well, it's very interesting because I've been in like I took part to some of my department, some of my university education's department to try to understand how to evaluate and try to spot this. Until now, I heard that actually the software proposed are not really able to spot when it's actually generated by AI or not. And I think you can play with it a lot. Like I know how to adapt the speech and everything. I think, to be honest, I don't know if we'll be able to. Basically, it's AI chasing AI, so I don't know how much the race is going on. And I think the only way I need to attend to another session, but is to think about new way to evaluate knowledge of students. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's a tough time for every professor and teacher, I think, today.
I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. There's another question in the chat. I had the impression that AI does not really manage to grasp mathematical logic. For example, on the few tries I did some time ago, it did not manage to write correct mathematical proofs. Would you agree here? And if so, do you think that may change in the near future?
So I think it depends what we want to do in case of mathematics, because in a lot of ways you can use models as agents and you can have them call code or something else, or a tool that can use mathematics. So it will not, let's say, solve a theorem straight away, but it might be able to solve a mathematical problem for you. And I also think there is a large effort into improving these models for mathematics, coding, stuff like that. So you can have models that are specifically trained for that, and they will do better than a general model. But coming up with like solving an unsolved theorem or something like this is like probably not something that happens right now. But again, if you're trying to just address a problem in mathematics, I think the best way to do this is, at least for the moment, not to straight away take, let's say, the output from a model, but guide the model to use a tool, and then that can provide you an output that will be correct, let's say, mathematically.
Yeah, I think it's going to be better in the future also. Like I saw some preprint speaking about new architectures of basically connecting different LLM. So you take a smaller model, which is very specialized in a specific task, and you connect it with another one and another one, kind of a global manager, and could address much more complex, but also specific, and it go from also mathematics. And to be honest, after that, I'm not a mathematician, so I don't know how far you are understanding this, but I think there is a range of improvements, and I think in the future, there is also a lot of about how to ask the question also with prompt engineering, as I say. Sometimes there is something called tree of thought, when you go thought by thought, and you can direct the large language model by basically, through the conversation, creating a logical chain, and it gets much more better for actually logical tasks, and we are quite surprised today.
I hope that satisfied your answer. And I think Catalin has raised his hand.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, Jeff, first to answer the question that was earlier about the EU rules with regards to use of generative AI. There was a conference in Brussels in October last year where the European Commission announced that they are bringing out rules specifically on this early this year. So they were waiting for the AI Act to be published, which was published in December. So probably already in February, they're expecting to publish very clear rules on how generative AI can be used in a research proposal. And this comes to my question also, because I think then this will open the floodgates with a lot more people going towards generative AI. And I wonder whether this will create discrepancies more towards research institutions that have a good data set to train, because a lot of research institutions are building their own localized generative AI, right? And they're feeding it with their own internal data. And then you can have like very good institutions who already produce high quality research, high quality papers, proposals, feeding that algorithm that then helps researchers from that institution create even better proposals and that will further the gap with between institutions. And I'm wondering whether there's, yeah, what are your thoughts on, is this a realistic scenario, or maybe there's way to counteract this?
I think I was there when AI Act was launched, and I think people said that the quality of research proposals has suddenly shifted gears. So they were quite surprised with it. Quentin, George, you can take the answer if you have.
I don't know. I think it's great. It's an interesting and clear examples of how the technology has been very fast adopted and actually will standardized, because I start to have a look also on this, and actually there is like clear things to respect in a way in order to maximize your chance to succeed your proposal. And you are not always very good with that. And now you have this tool that can actually always help you to redirect your proposal to the right track. So it's checking a bit the pot and everything. So I think for what you were saying, Katalin, it's exactly what I say about fairness and open. We are in a competitive field. We are put in competition all the times, and it's likely to become a competitive advantage. It's not going to free our time. I don't think it's going to make our life easier in a way, if I might say like this, but it's going to ask more to people that now this is a new standard of work. So, and this is why also this seminar is to try to raise a bit awareness around this, and maybe that we can position ourselves as researchers about this maybe upcoming futures. So I think staying aware of this and maybe try to express our voice for what we would like to see achieved and not, I think it's very important.
Are there more questions? If not, I would like to ask one, because I hear a lot of people saying that AI is going to take all the jobs. What are your thoughts on that?
What are my thoughts of that? I think it's normal to be scared. I will be honest. I absolutely acknowledge this fact because it's already happening for designers and some different things. And as we see the pressures that some company put to maximize their profit and limiting their, it's absolutely fair. I think, as I said, I think it's good to learn from us as a researcher. I will limit myself around this. I think we can get a lot of positive of it, but we need to properly establish a curriculum of learning and how it should be used to ensure we are not making bad science with it. And it can be an advantage for many people. For the overall situation of the society, it will change. After that, I don't know if it's going to create more jobs or remove more. I'm not going to slide into this forecast. Maybe George, you know some things, but.
I mean, I think that we will have, like, if people are willing to adopt it, you will get an increase in productivity. Maybe some tasks that you struggle with, it can help you. But yes, other than that, yeah, I think you just need the willingness to, I guess, work with AI, new models, and try to improve from there.
Okay.
There is one last question, I think, from Marcos. I don't think we answered it.
Okay, yes. So it's students today, when requested to write or synthesize text for graduate assessments, are using AI. They're not capable to respond questions that goes beyond AI, what AI provided. So how to use AI not to support laziness, but to foster students' outcomes? Interesting question.
Yeah, human are lazy by nature, so it's normal. Saving energy. I think I had this discussion again with the education department. And it was very interesting because the potential for education is very interesting. Like, we can make much more interactive learning process. We can make like dialogue. We can urge a student to explore subject with it. What is start complicated to be is like, are we sure that they are actually integrating this knowledge and these skills, and they actually can use it without the AI? And I think that's the challenge to test it today. from what I had as an imagination is that it's going maybe to rise again the expectation from people. So like when we were saying, oh, for tomorrow, write a 3-page dissertation about this subject, thinking that it was enough for someone to learn. Now they can do basically 20, 25 pages easily. Is it good to ask them to go above what a lone student can do, so they can only do it with an AI and then we are sure that they are doing some things? Then it's push everybody else who doesn't want to use an AI to use it, which is not, I guess, the solutions. Or do we need now, for example, to ask everybody to learn on their side and make a no-roll without any material and just reacting to spontaneous questions? I think it's still a question that the new educations and training world to imagine, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it could also have that teachers will have to come up with new ways to ask questions. They cannot just ask direct questions that people can just put it in the AI and get answers to. It'll be an exercise for the teachers as well.
Yeah, it's not easy. I think we will discover also by practicing. And I think it could be good to integrate students to say, how did you do that? You know, like what's the rationale and how did you do that? To finally find the limits. And the problem is that the limits are going to be pushed again. Like if the technology is developing more and more and more, some of the solutions we are going to create might not be good enough for in 2 years or 3 years. So no, I think it's challenging for educational team. And also it's very exciting in a way. So I'm not very useful with these answers.
Yeah. So that was perfect way to summarize the webinar. And we have come to an end right in time. So I would like to thank Quentin and George for this amazing, insightful session. And stay around for the next webinar. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.